You put up some drywall. You got it taped, you got it mudded. You did a pretty good job. Everything is pretty smooth. Now you want to get this primed and you want to get it painted. So you have one more step to do, and that's make sure that everything that you mudded here is smoothed out so there are no noticeable ridges or bumps in here. And as you look down the wall, it looks nice and smooth and flat. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to get that finish work done, do a little sanding, and then we're going to prime it and take a look at how to get that primer smoothed out so when you put that finish coat of paint on, you don't see any bumps or ridges or imperfections in it. So follow along with me as we go through those steps and make that happen. Let's get started. One of the big problems with finishing drywall is that it makes a lot of dust when you sand it. Now, I've heard of different approaches. I've even tested a few of them. One of them is to take a damp sponge and work the edges to get them smooth, but that gets the drywall damp and get real mixed results with that, and you have to have a bucket of water and keep dumping that and wringing out the sponge because you start to build up material in there. I like to sand it. Sanding does a better job, but it makes a lot of dust unless you use a tool like this. I don't even remember where I bought this anymore years ago, but it attaches to a good-sized vacuum, good long hose on it, and you've got a piece of this mesh material. This happens to be a 3M mesh material, comes in a full sheet. Cut it in half, so you get 2 applications out of a sheet. Work on one side. When it starts to get a little smooth, flip it over, use the other side. And the vacuum is constantly pulling the dust in, and I can tell you this makes very little dust while you're using it. When I sand the mud on a drywall, again, I try to get it on very thin, not use too much mud, and then that gives me just a very fine edge to smooth out. So what I do, and this is going to be a little noisy, get the vacuum turned on, and we're going to hit the edges first, up and down. And once those are smooth, then we'll take a nice, smooth, even pass over the whole thing to get any imperfections out, because there will be imperfections. That's inevitable. You get a little speck of something in there, or there's a little void it doesn't fill in, and we'll be going back to fill those in before, maybe even a little after we prime this. So let's give this a try. And that's it. That's the process. I have cut down any sharp edge that's here, and I've got it smooth and flat all the way across. I'm not going to video doing this entire wall. That's the process. That's really all there is to it. So I'm going to get this wall done, and we'll come back and see if we have any imperfections to fill in, take care of those. They'll dry quickly, and then we'll get this thing primed. A couple more points on using this attachment to sand the drywall to get it ready for priming and painting is that you want to make sure you don't do what I did. I got started and I noticed a little dust coming out of the exhaust. I opened this up and checked, and I saw that the collection bag had worked its way loose from the intake here for the vacuum hose. and the dust was getting up past the secondary filter and coming out of the back. Made quite a mess. I had to clean that all up. As long as I had it open, I put a fresh bag in. Which leads to another item, and that's if you're going to do a lot of drywall sanding, let's say you're going to do a couple rooms or even a whole house, they make vacuum bags specifically for use with drywall sanding. They filter better. I'm just doing a couple of spots here, so I didn't bother getting a bag like that. For the little bit I had to do, the standard bag was working well enough. One more pointer using the vacuum. I'm in a close spot down here, down in the basement. And these vacuum cleaners are loud with a very high pitch. So one of the things I've been able to preserve throughout the years, even with playing in a rock band when I was a teenager, is by using hearing protection, my hearing is still pretty good. So you want to make sure and use some kind of hearing protection, earmuffs or plugs, if you're going to be using something like this for an extended period in a closed space. This wall has now been completely sanded. And one thing I always like to do when I get done sanding is set a halogen lamp up at one end and shine it down the wall. And that will usually show you any shadows or any imperfections in the wall that need to be taken care of before you prime it. I know that seems a little bit fussy, but if you've got a wall, let's say in a room that gets a lot of sunshine across it, that sunlight will show any imperfection in that wall. Or like the brightly lit wall in this hallway. So you want to shine a light on it if it's kind of dark. I mean, if you've got the sun, that's great. If you don't, then use a halogen light like this, and it'll tell you. And this wall looks pretty smooth. One thing I do to check to see how flat the joints are where I've taped, so I take the wide knife after everything is sanded and just see if there's much of a hump there. And as you can see here, as I move this knife along, it's fairly flat. There's a little bit of a ridge in the center, but not very much. And that'll never show up once the wall is painted. Another little tip I will share here, and I don't know how well it's going to show up on the video, but as you look at the edges of all of these taped areas and where we've covered the screws, after I got done sanding, the appearance as you stand back from it will be sort of like the edge of a cloud in the sky. It's just very soft as it builds up until you get into the cloud itself where it's full. It's sort of a hazy look along the edges. That means you've got the sharp edges broken and you've feathered in the mud to the drywall to get rid of those edges. In one of the earlier videos I was showing work being done on this back wall too, in this music TV room that we have. And this had the butt joints. I've got those all finished off and sanded and ready to prime. I've got a little bit of fill work to do on the butt joint on that end. It didn't cover quite the way I wanted, so I'll touch that up along with a couple other little nicks in here, and this wall will be ready to prime as well. Thank you for watching the video up to this point. If you're a new viewer, I appreciate you stopping in to see what I'm up to. And if you're a returning viewer, I appreciate you coming back and taking a look at what I'm doing this time. Up to this point, you've probably noticed, if you're a returning viewer, I've done a lot of how-to videos. That's a very natural format for me because I'm always working on things, and I figure I might as well just make a video of it and share it with other people. And the reason I share it is not because I'm an expert at doing these things, it's because over time I have done a variety of things and learned how to do them, and while I may not be a professional and I may not do it the fastest and the best way possible, what I'm really trying to convey with these videos is that there are a lot of things that many of us can do if we just get a little bit of instruction, get a couple of ideas, and decide to just take it on and expand the kinds of things we can do and find new things that we enjoy doing. So with that in mind, I just want to thank you again for stopping by. If you've enjoyed what you've seen so far, please consider clicking like and subscribing to our channel, and share any comments you have about what you've seen in this video or in other videos and what you'd like to see. With that, let's continue on with this video and get this wall done. For this next part, I've changed into my painting clothes because, try as I might, when I'm painting, I end up splattering a little bit on myself, and I don't want to mess up my other clothes. First thing I have to do, where we taped the wall to the ceiling, and remove that texture. In order to do that, I've got to put some texture back up on that ceiling. And I'm going to do that by mixing up a little sand texture paint to match what was up there. And I have literally a can of what I have labeled cheap paint for sand texture. I keep that around. Works just great, acts as a primer. And what I do to get the sand texture is I put in sand texture material, not actual sand. This is Sandtex from Bondex. And this happens to be a sand finish paint additive from sheetrock. They both work equally well. I'll probably just use this today, and what I'm going to do is just take an old cottage cheese container, any plastic container will work, put some paint in there, add a little bit of the texture. I will mix that up, and then I'll go along the edge with this tapered paintbrush and finish out using just a narrow roller because it's a very small area up there, using this old ice cream pail lid for a paint tray rather than mess up a big paint tray to get this job done. This will be easy to clean up and rinse off. If you wouldn't have to, I guess you could just get rid of it. So I'm going to get that mixed up, and let's go ahead and get that ceiling painted. Another quick tip, if you want to transfer paint out of a can into another container and you don't want to get the top of the can all full of paint that you have to clean up before you put the lid back on, and then have it stick down and rust. There are a couple of ways you can do that. You can buy these plastic rings that go around your snap in place. They make a pour spout, but they sometimes don't fit right, and when you get done, you got to clean them up. Or you can take masking tape and wrap it around the inside. I have mixed results with that. Or what I do in a lot of cases where I got a quick job, I just take a little chunk of paper toweling, and I take my can opener, or I take a flat blade screwdriver and I just push it in tight along the edge of the top of the can. Then when I pour the paint, and I've already poured some, I'll just pour a little bit right there. You can see now that if I do have a little bit of a dribble, I can just take my paper towel, wipe that away. The rest of the paint is up here. Set that back a little bit so it doesn't drain anymore. And when I'm all done, take this out, throw it away, put my top back on, and my paint is sealed up for use another time. I've mixed up some sand texture. What I have to do, just like when you're painting anytime up to an edge where two walls meet, or the wall and the ceiling meet, you've got to take an edge brush and work your way along. So I'll do that, just tap this paint in. I don't want to get sand texture on the sidewall or leave it there. If I do get a little, I can just come back later with a putty knife and just knock that down like I knocked it down the first time before I did the taping. And I did check the texture on a small section I did on that end to make sure I had the right amount of sand texture in the paint, and it matches out with what's already up there, so we're in good shape there. And with that edge cut in, put a little more texture paint on this ice cream pail lid that I'm using for a roller tray. Pick some up on the roller, and then fill this area in between where I didn't scrape and the wall. Get that all tied in and matched out. Don't want to over roll it because then you'll lose your texture. And this doesn't have to be perfect. You will be painting probably a top coat later yourself if you're doing this. I'll continue down, finish the rest of this ceiling area, and we will go ahead and get this wall painted. Time has come to get these walls primed. I've got a pan here with a disposable tray. Those are a life and time saver. Got a medium nap roller here. Got a trim brush for cutting in along the edge next to the ceiling. And I have here what I typically use. It's called Fast Primer Sealer. You never want to paint directly on new drywall until you've primed it first. Priming seals it up and then gets good coverage with your top coat of paint later. I'm going to get set up and get that painted. I'm not going to take a lot of time in this video showing you how I paint. Painting is a pretty straightforward operation that a lot of people do. If there's any interest in that, make a note in the comment. Maybe I'll make a video on painting when I do the final top coat on the walls in this basement. So I'm going to get started here and get this done. And after it dries, I'll show you the little secret I have for making sure it's smooth before I do put the top coat on. Before I pour the paint into this tray, I want to note that as a matter of example, I had talked earlier about stuffing paper toweling in along the edge of the paint can to keep the paint out of the top of the can where you put the lid back down. I do have one of those pour spout attachments you can put on the can that happens to actually fit this particular can of paint. And let's just give that a try. And it seemed to work pretty well. Just a little dribble down the front of the can. So that works too. The only problem is now I have to clean that up later when I'm all done. The wall in the music room is primed, as is the wall in the sewing room. Eventually, I will have to prime all the walls once I get the stuff moved out of the way when I complete this basement project, because I'm going to paint the walls and then I'm going to put ceramic tile down in both rooms, something I've wanted to do for many years, and then get the trim back up. And the reason, of course, I need to prime these walls before I paint them, if you notice, dark green and gold color, those are official Green Bay Packer colors. At one time, this was going to be the Packer room with the Packer paraphernalia and souvenirs collected over the years, but we've changed our mind. We're going to put a lighter color down here, and we will have a completed music room without all the junk in it, and we will have a completed sewing area. I'm going to let both walls dry overnight, and tomorrow we're going to do the final step on this. Stick around to see that, to get this wall smooth enough to put a finish coat on. That last step is a pretty easy one. Whenever you prime drywall, particularly the areas that don't have any joint compound on them, any drywall mud, where you're over the paper surface area, sometimes you'll get a really rough finish. And depending on the primer you're using, it can get really rough. So you just simply take, again, the sander you use to sand the tape joints and go over that lightly over the entire wall to pick off any of that loose stuff or any little bits or drips of paint that might have splattered on here. And then that will give you, in the end, when you top coat it, a very smooth surface. Now obviously if you're doing a texture wall, that doesn't matter. I don't like texture walls. And so I like to get them really nice and smooth. And you cover this with a flat paint or with an eggshell style paint, it gives you a real nice soft surface. Once again, if you've enjoyed this video, you've got some useful information out of it, well, please click like and consider subscribing to our channel so you can see any upcoming videos. So until the next video, I thank you again for watching. Enjoy your projects and take care.